Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
Coaches, welcome in. This is season 3 of Essential Coaching Conversations. We actually did not say that in the previous episode, but we are in season 3. And like we said at the beginning of the last episode where we talked about Mick Cronin, we are doing something a little bit different this year in 2025. Kyle, tell the folks what we're doing.
Yeah, we decided over a little bit of a break and getting a chance to do some reflecting and trying to live to what we, talk about and preach all the time and staying essential and through some reflection and bringing about some awareness to us. I really enjoyed us getting on the pod and trying to get a chance to catch up and being kind of goofy and trying some things, but we wanted to get straight to the meat of the topic. And with everybody being so busy nowadays, and it just seems like life is never really going to slow down, and some feedback from some listeners, being able to give people these 20, 25 minute, deep, meaty episodes that are still compact and full of hopefully what you think is some good conversation, but trying to get to that a little bit quicker and allow people to stack episodes or knock an episode out on the way to the mailbox or run into the grocery store or something like that. So, we'll keep kind of mentioning that as we get into this series. But if this happens to be the first episode you've caught of season, recommend you go back and check out the Mick Cronin episode, because this one is going to be kind of the exact opposite of that one, a 180 of watching how a coach handles success and watching how a coach handles some adversity. And if you're not familiar with Mick Cronin, just Google Mick Cronin press conference after a 94-75 loss to Michigan and hear kind of the words that he had to say after that loss. And then let's compare those in straight juxtaposition to Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, who I didn't know was only 39 years old. I was surprised. I was surprised Mick Cronin was only 53, but I was also surprised Kevin O'Connell was only 39. I don't feel like we're old enough to be head coaches in the NFL, being 39 myself. But Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Vikings, obviously had a great season, 14 wins. Crazy that they had to play on the road in the wild card as a 14-win team, and then just got beat a couple, last week on Monday Night Football. And so their season kind of faltered at the end. But there's a really great article that you shared, I believe that was from ESPN.com, and we can put that in the show notes, and we recommend you read that. But there's just some really, really great things in there that you and I, we are all in on just sort of the mindset and some of these quotes and stuff with Kevin O'Connell and talking about how he has built this culture, and that video of Sam Darnold coming into the locker room, they're throwing water bottles everywhere and everybody's like going crazy. And he's just sitting back, holding the game ball, taking a deep breath and taking it all in. And the caption was something like, Kevin watching the culture he built. And we've talked about Mike and I winning those championships, being very intentional about it and kind of taking that in. And I'm hopeful now that their season has ended in a, not the way they wanted to. I hope that's a memory that Coach O'Connell has from the season, and not Sam Darnold throwing picks and all that kind of stuff on Monday Night Football. They were getting destroyed by the defense. I hope that's a moment that really resonates with him, and listening to how his players talk about him. That's the impact that I think you and I have been searching for our entire careers, whether we've been in coaching or not. I mean, you just got a text message from a former player from 6 years ago talking about the impact you had on her. You only coached her for less than a year. I got a great message from a former employee that I worked with less than a year, just talking about the impact that we had on them. And I think that's what we would define as success. And obviously we want to win games and stay in playoffs as long as we can, but sometimes we don't control those things. So I'll kind of shut up and throw it to you just to get your overall thoughts on the vibe of that article, what stuck out to you and why you thought this was important for us to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, first and foremost, you and I have talked about the idea that like our ideas need social proof, right? And that, Kip and I talk about this all the time, where he needs one of his schools that does, or one of his teams that does teams of men to win a championship. or to have a really, really good year, because otherwise, in the zeitgeist and sort of the mainstream of coaching, those ideas of like the human component being undefeated and mirror training and Raka and all of that stuff go out the window, because the championship and the championship caliber teams aren't doing that. Right. But then you see like Gino Auriemma at What Drives Winning, and you're like, well, he's the ultimate champion. Right. Mm-hmm. So which one is it? I would err on the side of that, the human component is undefeated. And so as far as what stuck out to me, and I ran across this article kind of by chance. Nobody sent it to us. I was just perusing ESPN.com, and I've really liked Kevin O'Connell ever since watching Quarterback on Netflix last year, when Kirk Cousins was featured on that right before they sort of jettisoned him off to the Atlanta Falcons. And even just watching the way he interacted, like he didn't do too much with Kirk Cousins, and he was always asking him what he saw and how he felt. And even like Kirk Cousins having a dedicated sports psychologist, I'm fairly certain that Kevin O'Connell never stood in the way of that, right? So he understands that these guys are pros and that they deserve to be treated with respect. And so the article starts out, and this is like fascinating, because you think about like particularly a pro football coach, right? And it's the image and the archetype of what a head football coach is. You look at like Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, Rex Ryan, who says, oh, I'm going to end the Aaron Rodgers country club thing, right? So Aaron Jones was prepared for the worst. The Minnesota Vikings running back had just dropped a pitch from quarterback Sam Darnold, resulting in a lost fumble and the kind of jog to the sideline that football players dread. Now, right there, that's the opening stanza of this article. And every athlete, every single one, and Kyle, you and I have been the coach on the opposite side that has tried to pick the guys up or the girls up because they know they're going to get it from the head coach because they did something wrong, right?
Yep.
And so it goes on to say, Coach Kevin O'Connell was waiting. It was the Vikings' fifth first quarter turnover in 10 games, the most in the NFL at the time, and the issue had been addressed repeatedly in team meetings. What Jones encountered, however, was O'Connell's secret sauce. He was stern, but not angry, Jones recalled. He just wanted to know what happened, Jones said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cuss. He didn't make you tuck your tail. We explained it, and he said to us, it's okay, guys. We're good. You're both pros. I know you'll get it fixed, so let's let it go. What head coach do you know would have the presence of mind in the game when his job was on the line, number one? Number two, they're leading the league in one of the worst things you can lead the league in turnovers. And they've already been talking about this a ton. I mean, juxtapose that with what Mick Cronin did in his post-game press conference, calling guys out, calling his staff out, all of whom he recruited and hired, to Kevin O'Connell, who is coaching at the pinnacle of his sport. And this team, the Vikings, go on to have the second best record in the NFL this year, right?
Yeah, they were tied with 14 wins and had to play in their division. I mean, the Lions won 14 games. I mean, they got beat by the Lions to lose that upper hand, but
right,
at the last game of the season. But like, you won 14 games. You only play 17, right? Like that's a pretty solid year. And then having to go on the road, which is kind of tough or whatever. But you're right, like not only did they lead the league in like the worst possible offensive category you can lead, they did it in the first quarter.
Right.
So like it speaks to not being prepared or not being locked in, or what are we doing pregame? How are we preparing? How are we warming up? Like, what's the mindset going into the game? When you're turning the ball over so early like that, the fire alarms go off, right? Like, so, I mean, you're screaming like, oh my gosh, like we're not prepared. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. Like, where are our heads at? And what do we need to do to address that? That to me is kindling for a Mick Cronin blow up. Right. Because you've set the stage for something like that to happen. And Kevin is sitting here going, nope, we're just going to be calm, because that's not going to fix it. We've got to be able to bounce back. And the fact that players are so shocked when this is how they are talked to or how they are treated speaks to this lack of evolution, or the slow evolution that I talked about in the previous episode, where the environment is changing faster than we are. And people are just not used to this. I mean, there are instances in this article where players are like, no, coach me harder, yell at me, call me out in front of everybody, set the standard. Like, show everybody that you can, be a hard ass or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's not me. It's not my authentic self. And he, probably not very many people are familiar with Kevin O'Connell's NFL career because it was a cup of coffee and he played behind Tom Brady for like one day and like it didn't go well. And they talk about some of that in this article, but I think at the end of the day, he's just being the coach that he needed.
Yep.
Back when he played. When he had his 4 interception game or whatever it was, when he got an opportunity to play behind Tom Brady and he turns that ball over and he's walking to the sideline, he knows what's coming. And so when an Aaron Jones has a similar moment and Aaron Jones is walking there, I would have to think that in his mind, he's going, say what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
However many years ago that was.
So not to get too into the weeds with it, but isn't that how we break the cycle of generational trauma and create exponential generational change? How many of our athletes, whether it was your guys at Simsboro, my kids at Brandeis, my women at Brandeis, my women at VCU, high school players at Woodson, South County, Worcester Academy, right? Like how many of those kids had a coach in their past that they said, oh yeah, this guy's a great coach, or this person's a great coach, this woman's a great coach, because they yell at me, because they scream at me, because it makes me go harder. And then they encounter somebody who's not going to do that, even on their worst day. They're not going to do that. And they sort of question, like, why are they not coaching me hard? And it's not that we're not coaching you hard. We're doing hard coaching. Right? We take a different approach. And I love that Kevin O'Connell has bought into that approach because he is, right? He is the coach that he probably needed. And generationally, he was coached by boomers. And we know that that's generationally, there's some damage there because they were coached by whoever's before them. And there was a very militaristic attitude towards sport and all of those things. And that's just not how it is and doesn't need to be that way. There's another quote from this article that Kevin O'Connell says, and he sort of gives his philosophy. He says, coaching, in my opinion, is about what you do in those moments to help make sure that your team improves and players improve. O'Connell, 39, told ESPN. And then doing it in a way that never, ever alters their confidence to go get their job done. And I'm going to throw it to you here in a second, but I have to preface this part. Anytime I have been in a situation where players are not performing to their capability, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, we get to the point in the conversation where the player admits that they are not confident due to something that is happening to them, or a situation that has happened, or the way that they talk to themselves. And likely, most of what they're hearing in their head is either coming from you as the coach or from their parents or from their coach from another team, right? Whether it's an AAU team or, their trainer or whatever. And so for Kevin O'Connell to take this approach with pros who all have a personal trainer, who all have a skills coach, who all have this and that and the other, right? To be able to say, I want to coach my guys in a way that never, ever alters their confidence. That has to be sort of the canary in the coal mine, that there may be a better way to do this, and that you and I have been championing this for years. And perhaps finally people will start to listen. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it's the proof of concept thing, right? Like we have to see people win, and you want people like Kevin O'Connell to win, because the more those guys win, the people that are on his staff, he's just building and breeding more Kevin O'Connells. And then those guys go off, those coordinators get head coaching jobs. And eventually, like I think what you and I have been sitting here hoping for the last 7-8 years, however long we've been doing this, is we're waiting on this tipping point to where the stuff that we talk about and we see and we ask and the conversations we have are not novel anymore. They become mundane, and we don't have to Mick Cronin this anymore. I don't have to do this anymore. I've got 75 podcasts under my belt, and everybody understands it, and they're all bought in. So our job is done, right? I don't think it's going to be that easy, and we're going to get to that point. But I do think we've got to hope that people like him can get a little lucky and win games and keep jobs and And hats off to Pete Carroll, being the old guy in the room who was doing this before everybody else was too, right? Like, it's not to say that there aren't coaches from a previous generation, but they're definitely in the minority when it comes to that kind of thing. And I've talked to you. I've been reading Built to Last and Good to Great, and you're talking about these pioneering companies that have lasted for 70, 80, 100, 150 years. And you learn about these CEOs and these presidents and stuff and the things that they were doing that now don't sound quite so pioneering and revolutionary. But they were doing this in the 70s. And you know what they were doing? They were caring about their people. They had purpose. They had a vision. They had a mission. It wasn't about profits. Profits were going to come. You're running a business. Part of running a business is to make money. You're going to coach an NFL football team. Part of that business is winning football games and winning playoff games. And Kevin O'Connell is going to have to keep getting there and eventually win some playoff games to keep his job. That is part of the business. But though you trust the fact that those things will come when you put the other stuff, quote unquote, stuff first. When you put the people, the why, the vision, the mission, the purpose, the standards, you build all of that first. And then eventually that's going to come. And to me, that was the greatest thing I got from Built to Last is it's not just being a flash in the pan. It's not winning one championship or having one season or even 2 good seasons or 3 good seasons. It's the freaking Patriots. It's the Chiefs. It's the Bulls of the 90s. It's John Wooden's UCLA. It's the Boston Celtics and the Lakers. It's doing that repeatedly over and over and over and over and over again and showing that you're doing the groundwork. Whereas somebody who can win 500 games as a Division I basketball coach, like in somewhat way, like those 500 wins are pretty fragile, right? And you're seeing absolutely that when the cracks start to happen. And the interesting thing between these last 2 episodes, again, is just the 180 of this. And hey, I'm gonna tear you down to build you up. Okay, well, I'm gonna build you up and build you up. And I think when you look at it like that, if you're going to sit there and tear somebody down to build them up, and on the other side, I'm going to build them up and then build them up, I've spent twice as much time building.
Right.
You're never going to catch me when you look at it that way. That's where I think the exponential generational change comes from, is if we start with the building and continue with that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have to knock a wall down here. We're going to have to change some stuff over here. It's not to say that this style is soft and that accountability is not a thing or anything like that. I mean, it even talks in the article about he's fining guys for being 2 minutes late. Like, time is time, and when you don't show up, you're going to be held accountable for it. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions, is that if you care about people, that makes you soft.
Or that you're lowering the standard by trying to be equitable and inclusive.
Correct.
To say, like, no, like, everybody needs something different. We're going to try with you, but the standard is still the standard when it comes to things you can control.
100%. And on the flip side of that, just because you're mean or you're a hard ass or you cut, that doesn't mean that you are tough. And in some ways, again, I go back to it's telling on yourself, because you're not allowed to control your own actions and behaviors. Right. And I'm not sure there is something much softer than a grown adult being able to handle their own emotions and what is coming out of their mouth. And so I go back to the awareness piece and the facility piece. I can be socially aware, but then I have to make a decision. And my decision is, we've lost 5 in a row. I'm going to show up and I'm going to blast my team, or I've got this kid who just fumbled a football in the first quarter. I've got an opportunity here. I've got a decision to make. We've still got 35 minutes of a game left. What I do right now can impact the course and the direction that next 35 minutes takes, which is why I think our conversation over why climate is more important than culture is a conversation that needs to keep taking place. Because I can't change the overall culture of the Vikings in a day, but I can change the climate with one conversation with Aaron Jones in a game, and that might set the course of that culture.
Right, no doubt. And so to that point about climate, I want to kind of end with this. This is another quote here from the article, and this is Brandon Staley, who coached with Kevin O'Connell when they were with the Rams. He's now with the Niners. He used to be with the Chargers. And this is directly from the article. He's not just a quarterback guy, said former Los Angeles Chargers coach Brandon Staley, who coached with O'Connell when they were both with the Rams and has spent this season with the San Francisco 49ers. He's not just an offensive coach, he's a complete coach. He has the innovation and football mind, and that's important. But there are a lot of good football coaches who can draw and design really good plays. But when you're a head coach, you have to be able to connect with people, and he's got that capacity. I mean, right there, right? You've got a colleague in the same job as you. That to me is the ultimate praise. And there's another quote. We'll link this in the show notes. But there's another couple quotes from some of his players, and like Sean McVay. That's what makes him special. He has a heart for people. He has an authentic emotional intelligence. And I know that for me in my career, and Kyle, I'm sure this has happened for you too, right? Like, we are offensively minded coaches because we like to score. Yep. But that doesn't mean we ignore defense. And I would never measure my ability to draw something up as a way of measuring my ability to coach. Right? We always and every coach will say, like, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. Okay, well, Kevin O'Connell's proving that. It can be both. Mm-hmm. Right? It should be both. You need to have the Jimmies and Joes in order for your X's and O's to work. And he knows that. But if you don't have the complete, if you don't have 100% of the engagement and motivation of your Jimmies and Joes, it don't matter what your X's and O's are. And I think Kevin O'Connell knows that. And what do we know about engagement and motivation as we end this episode, Kyle?
It's undefeated.
It's undefeated, and it's the two things that are tied most closely to winning.